Ah, hello. Sorry, I took out that intro. I took out our intro song yesterday whenever our feed went crazy. Well, welcome to the show. My name is Elizabeth, your friendly hillbilly host. And this is Hillbilly Crime. Happy Friday, everybody. TGIF. TGIF. Thank goodness it is Friday. So, we don't really have a whole lot of people in here this evening. That's okay. We're a little bit later than usual. I had a hard time today getting myself together. How is everybody? Look there, Miss Pam. It's been a rough day, but I'm feeling some better tonight. Well, good. Good. Bless you, honey. Bless you. Did Letcher County have a storm earlier tonight? They've had a couple storms. Kentucky weather has been absolutely insane. Like, we've had a heat wave here the last few days, and I saw on Facebook today Prestonsburg, which is not far from here, like an hour maybe at the most. They were flooded all downtown. They had pictures that just flooded. Just insane weather. Let's see. Did you all see where they were messing with Mickey's head about the elevator that goes to circuit court and not the jail? And did they encounter gloves or EMS gloves in the stairway? That's what I figured that they was EMS gloves that had just been, left there. We've got some We've got some new information tonight. Sad stuff, man. Just sad stuff. I told you every time I find out something new, it's never any better. It's only worse. It just keeps getting worse. I've never seen you in Pine Mountain Grill. I don't go to Pine Mountain Grill. I used to whenever they first opened, like the first 10 years after they first opened, um, they had pretty decent food and stuff, but then the prices just kept going up and they kept going with like cheaper vendors for their food, and the food just kept getting worse and the prices kept getting higher, and I probably haven't eaten there in a couple of years. I mean, it's one of the staples of Whitesburg, Pine Mountain Grill. It's a really nice place if you need like a meeting, have a dinner meeting or something, like a date even. I went on a date at the Pine Mountain Grill a long time ago, and my youngest was not happy that I was going, and my mom was going to watch him. And so I was in a hurry. I was late. I was running late. I was like 15 minutes late leaving the house. And so I ran out and got in my car and I left. And I got halfway to Whitesburg and Alan jumped out of the back seat and scared me absolutely to death. He was hiding behind my seat in the floor, and he was probably 6 or 7. And I was too late. I couldn't turn around and take him home, or I would have stood my friend up. So Alan got to go on my dinner date with me, and we never had a second one. He wasn't too happy about me bringing a stowaway along, but that told me right then that they weren't for me. because my Alan has always done stuff like that. He has never wanted Mom to go on a date ever. Okay, now one of the good things about us waiting so late this evening was that they posted the Crystal Rogers Brooks Houck trial. They posted for day 3, so we're gonna watch that too. I wanted to read a couple of these speak your pieces. I couldn't read. I quit paying for the newspaper, and it won't let you watch or read the last like 2 newspaper speak your pieces. But the last one I was able to get my hands on was June 11th, 2025. And there's a couple in here that I thought were funny. Or maybe not funny, but so one person said, I'd like to buy a drink for the people that defaced Patrick Little's buildings. Now that is the fella that pled guilty to messing with 2 kids, and he's a prominent businessman in this area. And he's the guy that was the judge's college buddy. And he did, Judge Mullins, by the way. And he didn't get any jail time whatsoever. He got 5 years probation, work release, and house arrest. And his business is just a few feet over the limit of how far they can be from like a school. I think his is like 85 feet past that limit or something like that, if I'm not mistaken. So he doesn't have any limitations for like where his business is. And a few weeks ago, somebody went down there to his business and spray painted all over the buildings. And they spray painted bad stuff like SA stuff, Chester, what rhymes with it. And so I wasn't too crazy about what they did, just because our area is already so trashy. There's so much litter and illegal dumping and stuff like that in our area. So it really didn't make the county look much better. But to address, sometimes it takes stuff like this, although I don't condone it. Although it does take stuff like this for our politicians and our leaders to finally get the hint. We don't like what you're doing for your friends. We don't like the fact that you keep getting your friends and people who used to be your clients whenever you were defense attorneys, and they paid you a whole big bunch of money. I'm sure they were your really good friends, right? Because you're sure not gonna pretend not to be a friend, or you're sure not gonna run somebody off and not be their friend if they're paying you $100,000. No, I don't see anybody doing anything like that. So, it's just not cool. And the citizens of this county don't appreciate it. The majority of us don't appreciate that. And then to go around and start, whenever you do start working as a prosecutor, then go around and start pretending like you're, fighting for the kids. Just as long as you're not defending the one who's essaying the kids, right? Oh, okay. Okay, that makes it so much better, makes it different. Okay. All right. So anyway, somebody wants to buy a drink for whoever did the graffiti. And then somebody says, why is a balding guy always grabbing at his private area and selling to kids at a certain shop? And then right behind it, it says, we have the other side of that video about what he said he had in his pocket. So I don't know who had what in their pocket or what they said they had in their pocket. But somebody's got a video of it, so might want to rethink that. And then I like this little poem. It says, my son, a secret I must share. Your wife and neighbor were a pair. But please, my boy, do not despair. For karma came to make it fair. She saw their kin, their guiding lights, and took all three in one quick swipe. I don't know what that's referring to, but it was very clever. It rhymed very well. Okay. And now here is one, and it says, put yourself in a car or truck with someone making their first visit to Eastern Kentucky by way of U.S. Highway 23 from Virginia into Letcher County. Just past the state line at Pound Gap, the view of Letcher County is beautiful. Then, as you go down the mountain towards Whitesburg, that nice view turns into a large junkyard of old bulldozers and other rusted mining equipment at what looks to be a business operation that has no regard for our county or what his blight looks like to visitors. Keep driving towards Whitesburg on US 119 and you will see a growing junkyard on the right of the highway just past Arby's. How is that lot full of junk not required to have a fence blocking that ugly view? Now drive a few yards more and you will see many remnants of the flood of 22. Outbuildings still sitting where the floodwaters washed them, along with abandoned trailers and houses right at the bottom of the road leading up to our county high school. How is this okay? If our leadership can't even address these problems, what kind of place will this county become on the next very few years? Well, I think that's a pretty good question for our leaders. They've got so much money coming into this county, but yet every time they have a fiscal court meeting, they talk about how broke they are and how they don't have any money. They don't have any money to fix the jail. They don't have any money to pay the medical costs. They don't have any money for none of this stuff. But yet we had so many millions and millions of dollars that were sent in here. Where did it go? Like, I'm not going to quit asking this question. So some people can think this is all going to go away. I'm not going to quit asking that question. I want to see where all that money went. I would like to know if there's so much money being sent into this area for the substance abuse programs, why haven't they fixed the jail with that money? Why, whenever, well, I hate to say it, I just hate to say it. How come whenever I was down there 10 years ago trying to guide all these people in the right direction, you know, so they wouldn't waste all this money. But see, that's the thing. They didn't want my guidance. They didn't want any knowledge or wisdom that came along with any of this stuff because they wanted every dime they could get. When that's the motivation, to get every penny and every dime that they can squeeze out of them and use us as their bartering chip, you know, it just doesn't make any sense. But when you look at it from that other perspective, it makes a whole lot of sense. They didn't want anybody that could identify what they was doing. But, okay, so let me get back down here to this comment. Why would anyone even consider dropping the charges against Mickey Stines? Everyone has watched the video. Mickey meant to unalive the judge, and he had planned on unaliving the judge when he walked into that courthouse. So something isn't right with the court system here in southeastern Kentucky. We all know what goes on in the courthouse. I've been saying it for a long time. I'm not the only one that knows this stuff. Everybody in this county and everybody in all the surrounding counties also know. Even the lawyers, when people have to leave Letcher County and go to a neighboring area to get an attorney, these attorneys in the neighboring counties know exactly what's going on in Letcher County because they've had to come here and actually work in that courthouse amongst them. They know what's going on. Nobody can't tell me. Nobody cannot tell me. I know one of them pretends like, oh my gosh, I just can't believe that this is really what's been going on. Bull, BS, BS, BS. They've heard it from enough of us. We've been their clients. They know what's going on. They've heard it. They've heard it too. But everybody just acts like, oh my gosh. Well, I never heard of such a thing. Because nobody wants to stand accountable for why nobody's ever said anything. Why didn't anybody ever do anything? Because they're not going to get themselves in no trouble. They're not going to go up against Goliath by themselves. And that's exactly what it would be. So, I've discovered a female. I've discovered a story. Now, some of these women will not come forward. And you know why? I don't blame them. I don't blame them. Because even if they do come forward and they tell what happened, most of them say, well, I did it willingly. You know, like, I think people are so hung up on feeling forced, like physically forced, or I was in this situation and I didn't want to go to jail. So because I didn't want to go to jail, I willingly went in that room and did what they wanted me to do. Now, many of them are married, and they were married when it happened, and many of them have children. So if they were to come forward and tell what they did 10 years ago or 5 years ago, actually, the timeline is all kind of fitting, because this latest one that I've discovered was in 2021, which is right along the same timeline that Ben Fields was doing his dirt in the judges' chambers. And so you have this young woman who had heard rumors about, she could, if she didn't have enough money to pay her fees for whatever. It wasn't, from what I understand, it wasn't just house arrest. I reckon if it could have been any kind of fee that that they could have gotten wiped away. So I'm not sure exactly what the fee was, but she owed a fee, allegedly. And so she had heard the rumors, and so she approached them and told them that she didn't have the money for her fee, and if there was something that she could do. Oh, yeah, there's something you can do, honey. You just come right on in here. And from what she has said, two of them went in that room with her. And you can use your imagination. Two of them was in there with her. So she did what they asked her to do, and then she left, and she didn't have to pay her fee. And she didn't go back, and she didn't go to jail either. So we've got more women who have got stories, who've got their own personal stories. But yet, look at what Ben Fields got with his plea bargain. He got 6 months. So if one of them was to come forward now, their husband is going to find out about it. They'll be ridiculed. Their children will be ridiculed at school, if not worse. Their children will know about it, which they don't know now. And even so how is anybody supposed to prove this stuff? They can't. And even if they could, even if some of them did have something that could prove it, what punishment would they get? Would it even be worth coming forward and exposing yourself? Because I don't think so. I wouldn't come forward. If it was me, hell no. Nope. No way. No way. And so, we've got some worse stuff coming, I fear. Why has there not been any investigation done yet? We still don't have any investigation. We still don't have anybody. Not one person has come out and addressed any of this. The only person that's come out and said anything was Butler. That's it. He's the only one that's come out and said anything. And I think since I've done a little bit of research and started digging into him and like the campaign donations and the campaign expenditures, you know, we found that Butler had spent over $20,000 in cash, over $20,000 to one vendor here in Whitesburg for campaign t-shirts. Well, these campaign t-shirts are supposed to be used to campaign, right, for yourself. But instead, he put them on sports teams, ball teams, put them on the back of all those kids on the court playing in AAU ball. I know because I got them. My kids have the shirts. My kids wore the shirts on the court. So, I mean, still got them hanging in the closet. Elect Matt Butler. Judge Mullins had all these campaign signs in his office. Let's see, there was another one in here I wanted to read. We all know what goes on in the courthouse. That whole place needs to be washed out. We need new people. And yes, we all know Mickey Stines is guilty. And somebody said, who is the person who told a pack of lies to the county judge executive, Terry Adams, to get him to close Letcher fire and rescue? I don't know if it was Terry that actually did that. Might have been, I don't know. This message is for the Letcher County Judge Executive, magistrates, and county road foremen. The old road in Payne Gap around by Fish Pond Lake is in deplorable condition. I realize there are a lot of roads in our county that were affected by spring floods, and we don't have the resources to pave all of them at once. It would only take a couple tons of dense grade gravel and a couple of workers and a couple of hours to make this road passable. One section of the road was washed out by a stream with no culvert. Another section has a pothole which measures about 6 feet by 6 feet and nearly a foot deep. That's true because I have to drive through it every time I take Alan fishing. Hasn't the magistrate of this district reported this matter? A lot of local traffic and many tourists with boats and trailers and campers use this road. So who would the magistrate be for Fish Pond Lake? Would that be Benny? I heard some people talking about it today, actually this morning. They're not happy. This district has to share. It's split up between here and McRoberts, which is all the way on the other end of Neon. It's very strange how they're connected. They even have the same school district, but you have to drive through an entirely other town to get there. It's just weird how they got it set up. But people aren't happy that the magistrate lives in McRoberts, and so Burdine people are all kind of just left scraggling. Like, we don't feel like we have any representation because they're all the way in McRoberts. Like, any decisions that he makes is going to be from McRoberts. It's not going to be for Burdine, or at least I don't think so anyway. But be wrong. Let's see. To a brother and sister taking advantage of some elderly ladies, which happens a ton around here. You two should be ashamed of yourselves for trying to get their property and anything they have when they pass away. I have let the elderly lady's family know what you are doing. People see what's going on. Good luck getting any police involved. All right. To the guy on line fork. Don't you know you are dating jailbait? Your so-called girlfriend is a child, and you could go to jail for dating her. How will your parents explain this? Fits right along with topic tonight, doesn't it? To the idiot back in the 18-wheeler up Marshall's Branch, about a half a mile. You are stupid. Someone is going to run into the back of your truck. Try something different. This is stupid. A certain little store is keeping people's change. If something costs $8.49 and you give them $9, you won't get your change back. People start asking for your change when you go into certain stores. Since all this stuff has gone on in the courthouse, shouldn't every case Kevin Mullins tried have to be retried, since it was all a misuse of power? And concerning the little statement that Mickey Stines made after they arrested him, "Don't beat me up, boys," does that entail what his officers did when they arrested other people? People in Letcher County need to wake up and find out what's going on in that courthouse. I'm telling you. I hear Letcher Fire and Rescue went broke. That's pitiful, but it's been years of poor management. It's not the first time it went broke, is it? All right, that's it on that one. All right, let's go watch the news guy on what happened today in the Brooks Houck trial. Let's see if this is the right one. Yeah. I also have another video too, guys. I about forgot about it. I found, so y'all know I like watching YouTube and stuff. And I was going through YouTube and it popped up one of those pedo channels. You know how well, it's not like statewide, but they have this group that goes around in Kentucky, like trying to catch people that are doing bad stuff to little kids online. And I found one that's very relevant, and I think y'all are gonna like it. But let's watch this first. Let's see, let me get to the right one.
Steve Lawson's ex-girlfriend saying she heard the Lawsons talking about moving a body on the Houck family farm. Well, our Shay McAllister now begins our coverage going into the weekend from Bowling Green.
Well, Doug, one of the most compelling witnesses we've heard from so far was Heather Snellen. She identified herself as Steve Lawson's ex-girlfriend. She also admitted to using drugs with Steve Lawson and Joseph Lawson over the years after Crystal first went missing. And today she gave us two different pieces of really interesting information. The first is regarding a car that she shared with Steve Lawson. This has to do with that whole new theory that offense just recently introduced, the one that they're going to use to try to prove that Steve and Joseph Lawson actually weren't on the Bluegrass Parkway on July 3rd. They are going to try to prove that they were up on Boston Road, which is a road in Nelson County that just runs parallel. So she said that the car belongs to her. Her and Steve bought it when they were together before 2015, but after they broke up, she's the one who kept making the payments, and it was her car. And when she left work on July the 3rd, she was driving down the road, she passed a bar and she saw it. So she went and got something to eat and then came back, and using her car key, she got the car, took it, and went and to try to hide it, she parked it at a family member's house. She said she left it there the night of July 3rd, the night Crystal went missing. And then on July 4th, she went back and she started cleaning out the car. And while she's cleaning out the car, she said today that she found needles, she found a bag of soured clothing, and then she found a little Louisville Slugger bat. That's what caught my attention, because you might remember during Steve Lawson's trial, Steve Lawson testified that he pulled a little Louisville Slugger bat out of Crystal Rogers' car when he was picking up his son, Joseph Lawson, after Joseph drove the car on the Bluegrass Parkway, got that flat tire, and called Steve for help. Now, how it got from that car into her car and then she found it the next day, we haven't pieced all that together yet. And in fact, the jurors haven't heard that Steve Lawson testimony, so they don't know anything about that. It's going to be really interesting to find out how or if they do present it to them. As for the second piece of information that she shared with us today, this got everyone's attention. It was something she said she overheard in 2017. She said that she was in Steve Lawson's basement doing laundry when she overheard Steve Lawson and Joseph Lawson talking about moving a body using a skid steer, a piece of construction equipment, on the Houck family farm. She said at this time they were all using drugs. She admitted that freely. And she also said after she heard this, she didn't tell anyone. She didn't go to police. She didn't talk to them about it. She said nothing to anyone. And part of the reason for that, she said on the stand today, was because she didn't want to get involved. She just wanted to stay out of it. This was about 2 years after Crystal went missing, and she didn't want to get involved in this big investigation. Well, several years later, she calls Kentucky State Police and says that she wants to give them some new information. What she actually wanted to tell them was that Joseph Lawson had been texting her about creating an alibi for that weekend of July 3rd and July 4th. She went to Kentucky State Police to one of their posts to talk to them about that, but they started pressing her for more information. And she got very emotional when she was being cross-examined about this, because Brian Butler pointed out that although she came in there willingly, they started treating her really poorly. They were yelling at her. They were saying, you know, you've got a son on the line here. She did have a custody case going on with her son. They were threatening that she could lose her son if she didn't tell the truth, if she didn't fill in the gaps, if she didn't explain more. And it was 3 hours in.
Now, let me bring it up again. When you've got people who go in and they have absolutely no idea how to talk to people, like they would have gotten so much more information from this woman if they hadn't have went in there treating her like a suspect, like they were going to charge her with red rum of Crystal Rogers. I cannot tell you how many police chiefs, they don't even know many of the own laws that we have to abide by, and they're the ones that are arresting us on the laws. You'd think that they would. I know that they're not lawyers, but they should really know more than what they do in most situations. But that just infuriates me. Absolutely infuriates me. It makes me think of Sabrina Adkins and how our own attorney general's detective, like that's the top dogs, they know better. If that's the best we got, that's the best we got, and they don't know any better. How do you expect anybody under them to? They're not going to do they're not going to do it the proper way because their bosses are not teaching them the proper way. When you hire your in-laws or your cousin or somebody who just needs a job, your old college buddy, somebody that you went to, I don't know, went to training with or something, just infuriates me. This family had to wait this long when they probably could have gotten a lot better information years ago, just because of the way that they conducted a freaking interview. It's shameful, and there's no excuse for it.
Into that interrogation, that she actually shared that information about what she had heard on the Houck farm. That was the first time she said it. She said she was so stressed out, she had a panic attack during this interrogation, and she was in tears on the witness stand today when she was remembering it. I will say Crystal's family was also very upset during this. And that was one of the details they had told us previously that they were really nervous about hearing. They were worried about hearing what happened to her and some of those gruesome details. And they were shaken up by it. Now, I will say this is one of those things that the jurors are going to have to weigh both sides. Was it peer pressure from police? Did she make it up? Or was it the truth? Shane Young asked her right before she walked off the stand, "Are you telling the truth? What is the truth?" And she said, "I'm telling the truth. The truth is I heard Steve Lawson and Joseph Lawson talking about moving a body on the Houck farm with a skid steer." Doug, of course, the jury gets to make the final decision here.
Guilty.
Shay, thank you very much. So much to talk about. A very busy end of the week in this, and the best legal analyst on the air for this case so far is WHAS 11 News legal expert, Louisville attorney Nick Mudd. And Nick, you have a lot to pick up on, especially about Heather Snellen. Okay.
I stop it for us, y'all.
Just to get into the minds of the juror, but can he be convicted of murder based on her evidence or testimony alone?
Well, no, but I think it's big. It's a big deal. And, this is the first time we've really heard Joey Lawson's name. We've, mentioned a little bit in the opening statement. We know his attorneys waived opening, reserved the right to open later once the prosecution's proof's done. But certainly this starts to tie into Joey Lawson with Steve Lawson. And now, I assume the prosecutor, what they're going to do is to tie this to Brooks Houck somehow.
Curious, why wasn't Heather Snellen brought into the Steve Lawson case?
Now, I also wanted to make a point right here. Do you all remember what this boy looked like when they first arrested him? He looked like death eating on a cracker. Okay? I mean, this boy looked like he didn't have no teeth. His jaw, you know how we look when we ain't got our teeth in and you got your chin all up. But when people are like on meth, yes, he's in a wheelchair too. We got to remember too what time frame this was, what year it was. And you think about what the rug of choice at that time was. Now, a lot of people back several years ago ended up with opioid addiction, right? That was the big thing. If they were wealthy, a lot of them ended up prolonging that opioid use longer than people like me who were poor and didn't have any access to money, right? So a lot of us ended up getting into treatment sooner rather than later. But where Brooks was so wealthy, you know, it really made me wonder. I got to thinking about trafficking, you know, rugs. And he's real egotistical. Like anytime you saw Brooks walking around, you know, he was just throwing that chest around. You know, he was a big guy and he'd run his shoulders back and forth. And he looked like a spoiled brat who got away with stuff. His brother was a cop. And look at what we learned yesterday about their mom. Their mom supposedly is the one who masterminded Crystal's death, getting rid of her. I mean, you cannot make this stuff up. What would be so important that you would want to keep people quiet about? Maybe past crimes or current crimes. If people knew too much, we've heard that a whole lot leading up to this trial, that Crystal might have known too much about maybe something that Brooks was doing. Maybe he was committing some kind of illegal business. We don't know. If he was trafficking rugs to somebody reached out to me and said that that they lived in that area, and that every time they would go to like a work site or something, that all of them that worked for him looked like they were users. It might have even been somebody in the chat that said that. But you know, substance abuse is a big issue in this state, and not just the state, in the dang country. And so to think that it's nowhere in this case anywhere, I think is would be naive at best. And you also have to think about the officer, Jason Ellis. There was a police officer that was unalived, and it's an unsolved red rum right in the same area. What if that police officer knew something, or he might not have even known that he knew something, but somebody took him out for some reason, and they went to enough effort to do it to not get caught. They put a tire out in the roads or something. They put something out in the road that, so whenever he came up on it, he had to stop and get out of his cruiser and move it out of the road. And he was pew-pewed from the mountain somewhere, or from the trees. So you have other crimes in that area that if by chance they are connected, it would really answer a lot of these questions that we still don't have answers to. But if rugs were involved, that would completely make sense with the police officer. If Crystal knew something that she shouldn't have known, that would make sense as well.
Because Steve and his son Joseph are both charged with conspiracy to commit murder, which you would think would be tied into this statement that they were going to go move a body allegedly on the farm.
I do wonder that. You know, it seems like she would have been a great witness for that case. Maybe the prosecution didn't want to tip their hand that she was going to be a witness in this case. So sometimes you got to balance that. Usually you play your best cards, but you know, they did know they were going to have a second trial, and maybe they thought this was more important, not only against Joey Lawson, but against Brooks Houck as well.
As we said just yesterday in this broadcast, I think Joey Lawson's name yesterday was only mentioned 4 times. He just sort of sitting there, those attorneys quiet. Let's go back to Heather Snellen. Tell me, as an attorney, why what she said was so important to have out there and exposed in that courtroom today.
Well, it gets out the idea of a body, meaning there's a body somewhere, meaning Crystal Rogers is deceased. That's the implication there. Obviously, knowledge on Joey and Stephen Lawson's part about a body. We don't know much details about it. That's all, it wasn't much she mentioned. But certainly the jury's got a big job in judging her credibility. The attorneys for the defense tried to rip her apart and say, look, you didn't come forward till years later. In fact, you were pressured by the police. And when initially questioned, you didn't come forward. But, the prosecution came right back and said, tell us what the truth is. Is this the truth, what you state today? And she said, absolutely. And I think that, that last line, the prosecution really got the last punch against the defense there with Miss Snellen.
This was a shocking bit of testimony. You can almost lay it under the category of bombshell like we had earlier in the week, only because we now have names of people that we've not heard of in this case coming out of the blue, starting to fill in the stories. The one thing I find, though, interesting is they've reported in the courtroom today that as of 2021, she had never reported this to police.
Right.
So what kind of credibility does she have, Nick?
Certainly, she's got issues with credibility. But again, she overhears this conversation, and they're talking about not just moving a body, Doug, moving a body at the Houck farm and with a skid steer. We've heard testimony before about a skid steer, Brooks Houck having a skid steer, things of that nature.
That's sort of like a mini little backhoe that can move around. It's not a huge one, but right. It's got the ability to shovel and dig.
Shovel, dig, lift things up, things of that nature. And that's why it's important. I think that's why the prosecution was so dead set on bringing her in today, is it mentions Houck Farm. She specifically said those words, and that was a big deal. Now, again, I'm not saying she doesn't have credibility issues, but what they're doing is, as we've talked about, they're starting to tie in everything and slowly build that case circumstantially.
As this trial gets closer to the 10-year mark of coming up the 4th of July weekend, this coming up, Sherry Ballard, Crystal's mother, has always maintained that her daughter was killed there at that farm. If I had to put today under a banner, it would be the day of contradictions for Brooks Houck. You even had a civil engineer who occasionally worked with him, I guess. Brooks Houck had reported and written that he had seen her that day. We're talking about the July 3rd area, or talked to her, but she then came in today and contradicted it, saying, no, that's not the case. I wasn't even working that day because it was getting close to the holiday.
Certainly yesterday, we kind of discussed how, in my opinion, the defense won. I think today it shifted. Prosecution won here. They put witnesses on that systematically dismantled Brooks Houck's statement. Jon Snow may end up being the star here, and I'll tell you why. He locked Brooks Houck into a statement shortly after the disappearance of Crystal. He locked him into a written statement, and he questioned him extensively for over an hour. And so, it wasn't like Brooks Houck had the benefit of going back and being able to look and say, well, I'm going to answer it this way. No.
All right.
Snow targeted in on him.
I'm glad you brought that up, because we're in just a few minutes. You and I want to ask you, because I'm fascinated by that. The whole process of Jon Snow's thinking, what he asked Brooks Houck to do.
Right.
Was he thinking to this very moment? We're going to get back to that in a second. But first, after Steve Lawson's ex-girlfriend, Heather Snellen, we've been talking about her, left the stand. A woman named Ashley Nally takes the stand, and Nally said she grew up with Crystal Rogers and did not like her. According to Nally, they had personality conflicts, adding Rogers was not an outdoorsy person, didn't like the outdoors, implying she would have never gone to the Houck farm for several hours in the rain. It was raining back then, 10 years ago. Nally also said that although the two did not get along, she always saw Crystal Rogers with her son and called her, quote, an amazing mother on the stand today. Well, after Nally left the stand, several more witnesses taking the stand, poking holes in the statement of Brooks Houck that he wrote several years ago, including Tim O'Daniel with the Louisville Metro Police Department's Digital Forensics Division there.
Now, you guys have heard me be real critical to investigators and how they interrogate. Now, I think they did a really good job in Brooks's interrogation, and I think they also did a really good job in his brother Nick's interrogation. I don't think that those officers who were involved in the investigation looking for Crystal, I don't think that they were trying to cover up for Nick. I don't think that they had the thin blue line and that they were going to, destroy their own careers to make sure they looked the other way. I don't think any of that happened in this case. I think that they just didn't have the evidence to go forward. And I think because they had so much money and they knew that they would be able to afford a good defense attorney, I think that that's what took 10 years.
WHAS 11's Alexandra Goldberg has one of the 2 seats assigned to WHAS TV by the court in Bowling Green. Again, cameras forbidden from this case by order of the judge. And Alexandra, you're taking very thorough notes there, as this was a busy day of testimony. Let's talk about Tim O'Daniel. He really went after Houck's alibi. How did he do that?
Yeah, Doug, exactly. These phone records are in complete contradiction to Houck's alibi. Now, we've been talking about this written statement, 8 pages long, took Houck about an hour and a half to write. He explains his whereabouts from July 3rd, where he was, who he spoke to extensively. Well, Tim O'Daniel brought these phone records that he say are extremely precise. They're Google records, which means they essentially record the longitude and latitude, his coordinates of where he is based on location data, or precisely where that phone is. Well, let's talk a little bit about what these records show. I'm looking at my notes now so I can give you exact timing. These records show that Houck's phone arrived at the Houck family farm at 9 a.m. and did not leave until 4. Now, of course, Houck did not write in that written statement that he visited the farm in the daytime. His phone is later tracked to a lumber store at 4:22, stays there for around 20 minutes, and then he heads to his home on Glenview Drive until about 7:05. And then at 7:25 p.m., that's when he heads back to the Houck family farm. Of course, this is where prosecutors believe Crystal Rogers never returned from. And he claimed in interviews with police that after that visit that night around midnight, he headed back home. Well, his phone is also tracked to be at my old Kentucky campground at around 12:15.
All right, Alexandra, thank you very much. Let's bring back legal analyst Nick Mudd here to talk about this. You've been fascinated with the cell phone data for well over a year, Nick. You even said a year ago that this could be some of the most important evidence to come out. And that's because, is it irrefutable?
It is. And I mean, I beat a dead horse on here, Doug, with you talking about, you heard me say it from the beginning, cell phone records, tower data. And, they called the best expert in the state of Kentucky, really probably one of the best experts in the Eastern United States. You're talking
about Tim O'Daniel.
Tim O'Daniel. He was trained by the FBI. He's done a ton of courses. He used to be a homicide detective. He's flawless on the stand. Okay. They cross-examined him at length, but he withstood it, and they really didn't do much damage with him.
So let's take folks back to, we believe now the date of disappearance, or the date of her alleged murder, is maybe July 3rd based on this cell phone information.
Right.
But let's go to when John Snow, Detective John Snow from Bardstown, Nelson County there, who was once the lead detective, is interviewing Brooks Houck around the 7th or so afterwards. And he tells him, Brooks, I want you to write down for me what you did. I want you to just give me your recollection. It took Brooks Houck about an hour and a half to write 8 pages.
Right.
Was John Snow at the time thinking, hey, I know we're going to match up this cell phone data with what he says. I can't wait to see what comes out of this?
He wasn't thinking that far, but he was being an excellent investigator. Any good investigator, when they have somebody that's a suspect, they're going to lock him into a statement. But he didn't just lock him into a statement after an interview. He had him write down, as you said, for an hour and a half, which means once you do that, you can't undo it. I mean, he was free to go. Brooks Houck wasn't under arrest. There's no coercion there. He is freely and voluntarily given a testimonial statement where he speaks, but also a written statement. And today the prosecution really started putting their foot forward to dismantle that through, as I've said, the most irrefutable evidence you have, which is cell phone data.
Because you can't challenge it. I mean, the jury was able to watch a moving map.
Right.
And here's the way it broke down in the courtroom today. So you had Brooks Houck write out basically that he was doing a bunch of nothing, but then they were able to show that his cell phone from 9:30 to 4 p.m. was on the Houck farm on that very date. Then from 4:30 p.m. he goes off to the lumber store. Then at 7:25 he's back to the farm where he stays there till midnight. And also, Nick, you were fascinated by the fact that it shows him at a campground.
It pinged at the Old Kentucky home campground. Certainly the defense is calling this the stopover theory, which they're saying it's just hitting off random towers as he's driving by going home. I think it's a big deal, though. I think it's huge.
Well, I want you to explain why, because can you convict Brooks Houck of murder based on cell phone information?
That's the thing, Doug, is we don't just have cell phone information, though. They're starting to put theories forward. What do we hear to tie in what we just talked about earlier? Steve Lawson, Joey Lawson, talking about getting rid of a body with a skid steer on the Houck farm, okay? Piece by piece by piece. Now, certainly cell phone records are great because they really are tough to refute. We all have cell phones. They hit off towers. You walk down the street, it's hitting off. It shows you a roadmap historically of where you have been and when you were there. Doesn't necessarily say why or what you did, but again, it's another piece of the puzzle. And I think today was a big piece for the prosecution. And certainly they use that, more importantly, to undermine the statements that Brooks Houck gave, not only the written, but the testimonial statements he gave to Jon Snow back on, was it July the 5th, 6th, something around there,
yes,
right after she went missing.
So if you're the attorney speaking to the jury there, so think of this jury today. They're hearing from Heather Snellen, and then Ashley Lally gets up there and talks, and a lot of this is hearsay. And can you really trust the credibility of Heather Snellen, who apparently knew this information but didn't even, as late as 2021, wasn't telling investigators about it? What are you going to tell them about the cell phone information? Is that sort of your aha moment here as we end the first week?
I think it's building that picture. You're painting that picture one step at a time. And so, the prosecution doesn't have to give their whole case with one witness. They're building a house, okay? And at the end of that, they're going to put it all together, and that's what they're doing with this. They're not saying this is the moment, this is the moment. They're building a circumstantial case one piece at a time.
The reason why you're our analyst is because you spent many years in the violent crimes unit as a prosecutor here locally in the county attorney's office.
I did. I worked with specifically Jim Lasowski. I tried a homicide with him together, and we got a conviction on that.
One of the prosecutors in this case.
One of the best, and he is the godfather of prosecution.
So
on the side.
You know the prosecution. You also know the attorneys. You know Brian Butler, who is the lead attorney for Brooks Houck. What is Brian Butler thinking right now about that cell phone information?
Certainly, he did his best to dismantle as much as he could. But Tim O'Daniel's a great witness. He knows his stuff. You're not going to know more than him regarding cell phone tower data. And certainly, the defense has this stopover theory. I think they said it was hitting Wi-Fi as Brooks Houck was driving home to his own house. I don't think that came out too great for the defense today. But certainly, you got to do something. You got to defend your client, and you got to, fight with what you have.
The small Louisville Slugger baseball bat. You and I were listening very closely to Shay when she was on there. Tell me the significance of that.
Well, certainly we did hear in the first case with Stephen Lawson regarding that bat. But the question's going to be, he talked about that bat when he gave his, I think when he testified and he gave statements in his case. We may not hear, though, his statements in this case, and I doubt we would because it's completely hearsay unless he was called to testify and chose to testify.
So the cell phone data that was shown today is date stamped July 3rd, 2015. Can we infer in that may be the day of her death? Because it's always been reported as either the 3rd, the 4th, and then you had those people testify yesterday. They saw her in a red car on the 5th, which we don't know whether that's accurate or not.
I think the inference is late on the 3rd, early on the 4th. And certainly, we have Brooks Houck at the farm from 7:30 p.m. to around, I believe it's 12:08 a.m. on the 4th. Mm-hmm. And so, that lends itself to questioning, okay, what was going on? Why is he at the Old Kentucky home campground? And I don't want to build, I'm not trying to build the prosecution case for them. They know more than I do. It's their case. They're building it, but that's a big piece going forward.
Sure, you're looking at it from both sides.
Right.
You're on both sides of that courtroom. And we're going to have Nick look ahead to next week. It's going to be a very important week. In just a second, do want to send it back out to our Alexandra Goldberg. She is in Bowling Green learning more about the last witness who took the stand today. And Alexandra, this witness claimed to be a neighbor of Brooks Houck and Crystal Rogers and revealed some shocking new details about the week after Crystal's disappearance.
Right, Doug. Mary Mattingly, she was a fascinating witness who took the stand today because she observed some really odd behavior the week of Crystal Rogers' disappearance. When she first took the stand, she explained her relationship with Crystal. She said they were friends. They spoke every day. Crystal would bake her cupcakes and embroider her children's clothing. Their kids slept over at each other's homes. And on July 4th, when she woke up in the morning, her mother walked to the front door and said, where's Crystal's car? And that's when she first got concerned. She said, well, Crystal doesn't wake up early in the morning. Well, that week, she said that she observed Rosemary and Nick Houck coming to Brooks and Rogers' home. Home, came outside, reparked their cars with the trunks facing the basement. That's when she observed Nick take 4 white bags out of his trunk. She said, not like trash bags, and place them in Rosemary's car. She also observed Rosemary was sort of digging up these purple flowers in the front lawn. She said that those purple flowers were planted by Crystal. Doug.
Very interesting. And can you explain, Alexandra, why Crystal's car would have been in view of Mary Mattingly often? I mean, why would she have looked out and noticed it was gone?
Right. She said that she lived right across the street, that she had a large window in the front of her house, that she was able to look out and see. Again, they both lived on Glenview Drive in 2015, next door neighbors, just right across from each other.
And so, once again, you were talking about a possible motive there from Rosemary Houck, who isn't even charged in this case. Thank you very much, Alexandra Goldberg, who will continue her excellent coverage from Bowling Green along with Shane McAllister on Monday. Nick, let's break this down. So you had Alexandra just tell us Mary Mattingly, good friends, neighbor, lives across the street, keeps a good eye on the car, sees it a lot. Crystal baking cupcakes. So Mary sees bags being moved back and forth, and Rosemary Houck digging up flowers. This kind of information, how does that settle with a jury?
You know, I mean, I think it's strange, but I don't put too much credence in it yet. And I tell you why. I mean, you never know what's going on in people's lives. The defense may have a plausible explanation for it. What I thought was more interesting, Doug, regarding speaking of Nick Houck, is they brought out right before she testified, Nick Houck's phone was completely off from July the 2nd to July the 4th of 2015. There are absolutely no records except to show his phone was completely shut off. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I've never gone more than a day without my phone being on, or otherwise I'm going crazy at the cell phone store.
Once you get 20-year-old boys, you'll find that you can't get them for a couple of days. But I see your point. Yes, you need them for your lives to operate. So we know that Nick Houck appears in that phone call when Brooks Houck is being interviewed by Jon Snow, and that takes it to July 7th. And you're saying today the evidence showed his phone off from the 2nd through the 14th.
Through the 4th.
4th.
Second
okay.
through the 4th.
4th.
Essentially that time period that Crystal went missing, that 3rd to 4th area. And remember, Shane Young has already said he's an unindicted co-conspirator. So, you know, I think I don't know fully what to make of it other than to say it's very strange. It's very odd.
There's Rosemary on your screen right there. That's the mother of Brooks Houck and Nick Houck.
And I wonder why Shane, the prosecutor, Shane Young, asked that question. I'm wondering if that they're setting up something else later for the case.
You know, we also had, we briefly talked about this, I talked to this with Shay yesterday, but the surveillance video of cameras which were tracing Crystal Rogers as she was in a Walmart, moving around stores, showing her alive, moving around. Some video we have never seen. The public only knows those still photographs of Crystal Rogers that have been released, never any digital video or old home video. Do you think that's still seared into the minds of the jury? In a way, I know that showed her last moments alive, but didn't it humanize Crystal Rogers for the first time?
Oh, absolutely. And showing her with her child, showing that, hey, this isn't just some person. This is a human being who's a mother, a daughter, a sister, a person whose life has meaning, a mother of 4 children. And I think it gives context and shows the jury this is a serious case that severely impacted, really a whole community.
Let's look ahead to next week. Of course, next week's going to be an interesting week because you have the holiday parked on Friday. The judge won't take him up there, so we'll have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday testimony in this. He is saying he's going to wrap this case up by July 8th. Do you think next week will get us closer to that possible verdict date, or what do you expect? How does this case turn next week?
I think the prosecution keeps ramping up their case. I would be surprised if they finish before Tuesday or Wednesday. I think the prosecution may go all the way till Thursday. But, I believe the defense, either for Joey Lawson or Brooks Houck, I think they are going to have some witnesses, and certainly they're going to mount a defense here.
So this was an interesting week where other people's names were thrown out, like Rosemary Houck, Nick Houck. Really, we spent a lot of time on them. Again, they are not charged in this case, but they've always been suspected by the residents of Bardstown.
Right. And we've heard more and more about that, such as we talked about the phone. We heard the witness, Mary Mattingly, talking about the strange behavior. But again, they're not on trial here. And the prosecution has to keep the focus on Brooks Houck and Joseph Lawson. They're not there. The jury's not there to decide that. And you don't want, as a prosecutor, you don't want a red herring and the juror worried about other people, other people's involvement, et cetera. You have to keep the focus.
I am fascinated by the legal personalities in that room. Big names in this community. Right. Steve Schroering, Brian Butler on the defense side, Jim Lisowski, Shane Young, the prosecutors. These have been names around here for the longest time. I remember covering Lisowski myself when he was almost a public defender, as it is. So when do we see Brian Butler in action? Because he's the heavyweight attorney. He's the high-priced attorney in that courtroom.
He is. I don't know how him and Steve Schroering split the work. Sometimes you say, you do the first half, I do the second half. You do these witnesses, I do those witnesses. We did see a pretty blazing cross-examination of LMPD Detective Tim O'Daniel today by Brian Butler. And certainly we got a taste of Brian's skill with that.
Talk about that. Was he able to poke holes in Tim O'Daniel, though, with his expert evidence?
I think he provided as best defense as he could. I think, one of the things I thought was interesting, the detective talked about the topography and how things like concrete walls can impact whether a phone pings off a tower. And Butler ended with, he showed a picture of Crystal Rogers' abandoned car on the highway and said, quote, "I don't see any concrete or hills in front of that cell tower. Nothing impeding it, does it?" And so I think he was doing his best to poke holes. But again, Tim O'Daniel is one of the best in the Eastern United States at what he does. And so I don't think they made much headway there. They did their job, but you can't make facts, okay?
Right.
You get what you get, and that's what you got to work with.
So let's go to the Nick Mudd scorecard as we are looking at who wins the day. As far as this week has been laid out, you gave it one day to the defense. The second day was a wash.
Right.
So it was a draw. Go over your view again today as we wrap this up.
I think the cell phone tower data, which Doug, I don't mean to beat a dead horse. I've been talking about it for over a year. I think it's a big deal.
Well, you were accurate.
I think that the prosecution won today. So we are 1-1-1, I guess you would say. But I think we're going to see more of a stronger case for the prosecution coming next week.
Your thoughts here sitting on a Friday, Brooks Houck, Joseph Lawson, they take the stand?
No. Absolutely not. No reason to. Brooks Houck gave a statement and a testimonial, speaking statement, testimony, and a written statement. And still with Joseph Lawson, we still haven't heard his name much, Doug. And I think his attorneys are playing it right by sitting back and waiting for their time. They are lying in wait. and they're going to strike when they need to.
The only thing is we know, because they stated it early on, and that's the prosecution, that they have no evidence of Crystal Rogers. They do not have her body. They have no inkling what happened to her. Even John Snow reported in his testimony in the courtroom this week that it was 4 years starting from the investigation, and they still had not made any arrests. 4 years from her disappearance, and they had no evidence. 4 years into it.
Right.
That's a cold case.
It is. It is. Absolutely. And I still say, you know, people can cite statistics, et cetera, about cases without bodies and things of that nature, but most of those cases don't even get charged. And that's the thing. They're difficult to prove. They are difficult because you don't have a where and you don't have a how.
It's almost over.
Unless we had a body. So, but you know, you can win I have won one circumstantial case as a prosecutor on a murder case. I'm telling you, it's possible. It's difficult. It's hard, but it's possible.
Were you surprised you won that case since it was circumstantial?
It hung the first time and I won the second time.
All right. That's something we haven't talked about in yet with this case.
Yeah.
Could be a possibility, and we will be doing that as we are back with you at this same time Monday.
Okay. What do you guys think about the way that the trial has went so far? So yesterday, the lawyer who analyzed it said that the defense had won the day. Today, he said it's flip-flopped. The prosecution has won the day. So I'm worried about Joseph Lawson. I think that guy's right. His attorney is playing it right, I think, just by sitting back and letting Brooks' attorney kind of take the reins. I hope he don't get off, but we'll see. We will see. Okay, so let me show you what I found. All right. This top one here says Richmond, Kentucky man gives speech at sober living home, then plans to meet the decoy after. We're not going to watch it because we don't want to get copyright strike, but I did link the video in the description. This is from the Kentucky Predo poachers, and this was 6 days ago. And here is our alleged editor that Kentucky Predo Poachers was able to work in coordination with Richmond Police Department to get off the street. I watched it today myself. I don't know what sober living it was. They redacted the name of the rehab that this was connected with, but we all know some of the really big rehabs in that area, so it could have been any of them. And this guy was talking on a phone to a minor child and was sending him pictures of himself. And he was also trying to get her to send him pictures of her. And he was just there to celebrate his sobriety. and give a speech, you know, get up in front of all those other clients there and give a speech thanking God. All the while, he had invited this child to come to his speech. You cannot make this stuff up, you guys. Richmond, Kentucky is not all that far from here. It's what, an hour and a half, you guys? Thank you, Woman of Steel. Happy 250th birthday, America. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, honey. You know, I think it's just happening over and over and over again. And it's not just the men. Don't think that I just pick on the men. We've got women school teachers that we're seeing every single day get caught up in some kind of romantic relationship with children. I don't understand it. Do not understand it. There was a story today of a bowling coach somehow got into the home of a child that bowled on his team. He was a volunteer coach, but he had passed all of the background checks and all that. And he broke in. I don't know if he broke in or if she let him in. They didn't know that yet. But somehow they found her unalived, and then he did it to himself. So they found both of them in their home. Some of her family, I guess, found them. And then in like 10 minutes later, I see a story where a woman, a 28-year-old woman, who was absolutely beautiful. The woman had everything that anybody would ever want in life. She had a beautiful home. She had a nice looking and successful husband. Okay. She was messing with an 11-year-old boy. That's when she started having the relationship with him. Somehow she talks the family, the parents of this child, into letting him and his siblings stay in her home. The little sister even has the little sister has reported, like she would wake up in the morning and go find her brother in the teacher's bed. And she ended up having a baby when the boy was 13, passed it off as her husband's baby, but really the child was the father of her baby. Like, you know, and you're 28 years old, and this is an 11-year-old child. Like, what is wrong up here? What is wrong up here? Because not only are you going to jail, you are going to jail. But not only are you going to jail, but this child now will have the most just unimaginable skewed sense of love, you know, self-worth, confidence, I mean, you name it, because she stole his childhood from him. Could you imagine being 30 years old and having a 20-year-old kid, a 19-year-old kid? Like, you did that to this kid. You did that to him. Ruined the rest of his life. And we're talking about, not only do men prey on children, but women do it as well. You know, it's not just a sickness that, you know, like, I don't want people to think that I'm always coming down on men, because it's all right, guys. I'm gonna go ahead and end this tonight. We're having software issues again. We're always aiming for a show on Saturday. Always aiming for it. I don't always make it, but we're always aiming for it. So just watch for us tomorrow evening. And if for some reason I end up taking tomorrow off, I will post it and let y'all know. But yes, Woman of Steel, parents need to tell their kids gently how to protect themselves. Yeah. And, you know, and protect your kids. Like, don't be sorry for, you know, wanting to know where your kids are and, you know, being a parent. Don't apologize about being a parent. We're not supposed to be our kids' friend. Every time somebody has wanted to just be their kid's friend, every time I've seen it, it doesn't always work out very well. Really doesn't. You know, sometimes we've got to be parents, you know. Children want to be corrected, you know, whether people believe that or not. They really do. They want guidance, you know, or else they end up our age and like thinking back, I'm like, man, you were giving me cigarettes when I was 10 years old. You were buying me cartons of cigarettes when I was 13 years old. Is that love? Because I wouldn't do that for my kids. I'm not giving my kids a carton of cigarettes. Smoke up, buddy. Here you go. Let me stick it in your Christmas stocking. No, thank you. I'm not going to do that to my kids because I love my kids. Because I love my kids. Now, my dad did that to me. I guess. He said he loved me. But I'm not going to do that to mine. Break the cycle, people. break the cycle. It's absolutely doable. All right. Well, thank you, Jesus, for another day being able to come together in your name. Lord, I love you. I'm so grateful for your presence in my life, and I'm so thankful for all the blessings that you give me. I'm grateful for my health, Lord. I'm thankful for my children's health. I pray for each and every single person out there under the sound of my voice, Lord. I pray that you touch each and every one of us according to our need, and you know above all what we need. I love you, Jesus. I pray that you forgive me for my sins. I thank you, Jesus, for saving my soul. And until we come again tomorrow, we give you all praise, honor, and glory. In Jesus' name, amen. I always told, I always told my two boys that if they end up hating me, that means I did my job. Well, and then what's the Bible say? The Bible says, you know, Bunny, 1576. Oh, if people just wake up, there's horror all around, and watch any true crime. Women are just as bad these days. Evil doesn't care, man or woman. That's right. That's right. Okay, y'all. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bless you, bless you, bless you. Peace out, Girl Scout. Bye.